And that's why in most cases when people say, "Oh, my assessment's too high," and we say, "Well, go to ask Garrett if
Market
if you would,
value.
yeah, if you would if you would sell the home for that amount."
Yeah, because when you look at your tax bill, you see the value of your structure, right? The building, and
Hmm.
you go, that's way low, in terms of market value.
Hmm.
But as a real estate person, you might recognize that. As just a homeowner, you might not be looking at it from that angle.
Hmm. Hmm.
Coach, welcome.
Absolutely, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Bob Henriquez, property appraiser for Hillsborough County. I appreciate you doing the show. I think there's a lot of questions, right, about what the property appraiser's office does. Like, we have these different offices within the county government: tax
Hmm.
collector, property appraiser. That's you. So thanks for doing the show today, and I hope we can sort of establish what you do, what your office does, what it doesn't do,
Maybe important what it doesn't do.
maybe important what is it doesn't do. So why don't we start with that, right? So why is the property appraiser's office necessary in general, right? What is the structure of this? I think before we went live, you talked about the state,
Hmm.
requires the county government to have this office.
Well, clearly, I mean, there's two large revenue sources in the state of Florida: sales tax and property taxes. So you have to have if you're going to have property taxes, you have to have a property appraiser in each county that figures out the value of properties, so that subsequently, based on the tax rates, how you would accrue that revenue. And so, really, to kind of explain it, our constitutional charge as the property appraiser's office is to value all of the property in Hillsborough County. There's about 570,000 properties, more or less, each year that we value. And then any exemptions that people may qualify, we accept those applications, and then homestead exemption, et cetera. That literally is what our office does. And so that's something that's on an ongoing basis each and every year. Now, what we don't do is we don't set the tax rates. So each year, the taxing authorities, City of Tampa, Hillsborough County School Board, Children's Board, Port Authority, Aviation Authority, the City of Temple Terrace, Plant City, et cetera, they set the tax rates, the millage, based on the revenue that they desire that particular year for their budget. We don't have any handshake with that. And we don't collect the taxes. That's the tax collector's office.
Mm.
And so a lot of folks think that we do all of those things, but we really don't. So all we do, based on January 1st of each year, is assess our opinion of the value for the piece of property. We send all of the information based on that value estimate altogether to the taxing authorities. They set the tax rates and the millages, and we go from there.
And so how is the property assessed? Like, let's just use maybe my house as an example, right?
Right.
Obviously, it's public record what I paid for my house.
Hmm.
Is it based on that? How do you guys find the value of somebody's home?
Well, there's three approaches to value when you're talking about assessing the value of property: the sales comparison approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. So the sales comparison approach, in your example, for a single family home, in most cases, we would use the sales comparison approach, which is the same as a fee appraiser or a private appraiser would use in case of, you were taking out a loan on your property, or you're buying a piece of property, what have you, trying to figure out what the value is. So the approach from that standpoint is you're going to compare sales of like properties, comparables within a neighborhood, and then that gives you an idea of what the value of the property may be. Now, the difference with us is we're in a mass appraisal world: 570,000 properties, maybe 300,000 or so that are homesteaded properties that homeowners have. So in that case, it's a little bit different than that we're using raw square footage, sort of a 40,000 foot view, and a larger a group of comparables within a neighborhood, whereas a fee appraiser or a private appraiser picks out, say, three comparables in the neighborhood. It's a much more granular. They're in the home. They're looking, okay, this one has granite countertops, this one does not. So it's a more of a forensic kind of view of the value. The approach is the same. Now, the income approach is for income producing properties, obviously. And the cost approach is literally the cost of replacement of the structures or the buildings on a piece of property, new minus depreciation, then you add in the land value. So the approaches are the same. One of the biggest differences is that we do it based on January 1st of every year. That's our effective date of valuation. Reason being, you want to know that if we live next to each other, that my house is being valued the same day as your house for the purposes of property taxes.
So it's not based on the sale.
No, not on the individual sale. Now, ultimately, that sale price will go into the paella that ends up being at some point, maybe the next year, when we're looking at a house that sold down the street, your sale will be added into that mix. But the cost of your individual sale, now, we'll consider that, and we're gonna look at it. So when a house sells or you sell a home, we're going to verify that sale, so make sure that it was an arm's length transaction, and those kinds of things to make sure, because maybe somebody paid if the sale was, somebody came down and it was their homestead when they were a kid, so they paid $200,000 more than it may be worth. We're going to look at it and say, well, why is the case?
Our furniture was included in the
Or
sale.
whatever, right? So that we verify all the sales each year, so then we can kind of throw them into the mix for the overall when we're considering sales in the future. But the individual sale price is not. So if you bought a house for $1.2 million, your taxes aren't going to be exactly based on 1.2 million. And to that end, there's also things that go into the ultimate price of the sale that are costs of sale that are not value in nature. So certain fees, realtors' fees, things like that that are part of that sale that may actually not be actual value. So the state allows us, in fact, requires us to back that out of the ultimate valuation. So that's why generally that, along with the fact that it's based on January 1st, the sale could have taken place in September of that year, kind of is part of the reason that when you look at our values, in most cases they should be below actual market value. We always tell people, take a look at the value you have for the purposes of property taxes, and then ask your favorite realtor, Garrett Greco, would you list that property at that amount? And generally we're 15, 20, 25% lower than what it would sell for on the market, open market.
And you said there's over 500,000 properties in Hillsborough County.
About 570,000.
570,000. So that's why you have to have this higher view, right? You can't talk to every single property owner.
Yeah. Well, no, it's called mass appraisal. So it's largely based on, we have a thing called a CAMA system, computer assisted mass appraisal. We put all the information in there, and it helps us to kind of crunch the numbers and that. Now, those are all property types: this residential, commercial, industrial, and tangible personal property as well, which are returns that businesses send to us with all the things that they use, like the stuff around this office that you use to do your business.
AI and algorithms probably play a role in the future if they don't already, right? Trying to figure out
more and more. A lot of it's still somewhat manual, but a lot of it is automated. And sort of the future of the business is moving more and more towards multiple regression and different modeling like that. And again, AI, it can be a tool, but it also can be scary for folks. It's like when people started using drones out there, everybody was asking me, do you use drones? No, we don't know. So
not yet, I guess, right? Maybe one day. So when I first bought this building, a guy from your office pulled up.
Yeah.
And I had never seen someone from the property appraiser's office on site like that. And I was talking to him, like, damn, you guys pull up like that? And he's like, yeah, like we're out in the field and we're looking around and stuff like that. And we were talking about the sale and did it include furniture, equipment, and some of the concessions and stuff like that. And he was saying oftentimes, you go out to try to better understand property value, just as you described.
Exactly.
So there's people in the field that are actually going to properties,
right,
checking them out.
Yeah, there's really
to people.
a couple ways we have to do, in addition to for new sales, like the one that you're speaking to. Each year we have to review, or over the course of 5 years, we do it over a 4-year period. We have to physically inspect all of the property in Hillsborough County. Part of that is the old-fashioned way. We have our hybrid vehicles, so we're very green, out in the field doing it that way. More and more now, is 80 to 85% of our reviews are done using what we call Geo Viewport, which is we actually have people at a monitor or 2 monitors with all the information about a piece of property, enhanced aerial photography, street views, and we can do a lot of those reviews as well.
How long have you been the property appraiser for?
I took office in January of 2013.
2013. So since then, I mean, that's over 10 years, but even in the last 5 years, the sales prices and some of the growth and inflation of the price level with real property is so extreme.
Absolutely.
So we just saw over here the property in downtown Tampa. David, you did a write-up on it, sold for I think a little over $40 million for that. I guess it was one full city block.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is unbelievable. And I think even 5 years ago, you might not have even seen half that, right? So
Yeah.
even like the house I bought is probably 150% more than it would have been 5, 6 years ago. So how does your office be dynamic in nature with the recent inflation and so many people moving here, the high level of demand we have? It's probably made you maybe rethink processes or at least be quick with information to try to
Well,
value
again, we
these
can't
properties.
chase the market or predict the market.
Right.
We can obviously we keep up with trends and things like that, but we're highly regulated by the Department of Revenue, and we're historians for lack of a better term, because we're looking based on January 1st of a given year. That's the effective date of valuation. So when you receive the date that we're doing this, many people or everybody just received their notice of proposed taxes in August.
Yep.
And so that's based on January 1st, 2025 in this case. So, so the data that we're looking at to derive those numbers are largely based on, the previous quarter back in 2024. So things happen during the course of 2025. The market may go up or down. Now, I will tell you, January 1st, 2025, this year's market was the first year countywide that it was basically a flat market. We didn't see the kind of increases. Now, on an individual basis, particular neighborhoods, particular parts of Hillsborough County, City of Tampa, the values continue to increase a certain amount, not to the extent that we've seen in the past. But otherwise, since I took office in 2013, coming out of the Great Recession, we've seen anywhere from 6.5%, 8%, 10%. Then we saw, I blame Tom Brady, the between 21 and 22, overall 21% to 24% increase in overall property value in 1 year in Hillsborough County. Now, sale prices, as you know, were based on what part of the county you were in, were more like 30, 35%.
Right.
So again, we don't set that. The market is the market, but certainly there's been a great deal of increase in value, which as a result of that, there's been a great deal more revenue accrued by our taxing authorities, or more tax, commensurate to that is at the same time, as we all know, there's been a great deal of increase in, in all of our budgets and what it costs to do business.
Right.
That translates to government as well. So there's a balancing act there as well. But again, I have been one, to be honest, we like to say this, the Doge is the operative word right now, that we were Doge before Doge. So our office, when I came into office, and again, utilizing technology that we kind of touched on a bit, when I came in office, had 134 employees. We have somewhere around 94 right now. And our budget, we've cut our budget like 4 times in the time that I've been in office, and
Wow.
we've had very modest increases in the years that we have, and it's always been something that's passed down, insurance increases going up, or requirements coming down from the state for like our retirement and things like that. So we've been very, very mindful, and I've cautioned the taxing authorities, and it's all kind of coming to fruition now, whether it be the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and others. At some point, people are going to start to say, well, gosh, you've been, and this whole kind of discussion about property tax
Sure.
reform, which I'm sure we'll talk
Yeah.
about, really has to do more about spending and what's going on at the local level. And so, that's kind of what that discussion is all about right now. But certainly values have gone up, but I will tell you that it's kind of, we have to remember that a lot of this increase in value and increase in the market is the market. So folks are willing to come here, have been coming here, and pay a certain amount for pieces of property. That means the values are going to go up. It's a desirable place to be. We don't, I can't artificially change that. If I did, the Department of Revenue, looking at our overall level of assessment would flag us and say, and not pass our tax rolls.
So that is the entire focus of your office. It's not about, necessarily the policy that sets the millage or
No.
that is up to those boards and authorities and municipalities. The tax collector is the one that collects the taxes, right? Collects
She gets
the
mad
revenue.
when I say they write about her badly in the Bible, but
But
no,
again, your strict focus is just the assessment, the fair
right,
assessment
fair and
of
equitable assessment of the property. And that's tricky because, again, on an individual basis, what's fair to you and what you think is equitable
sure.
are two different things. And frankly, the system is built to protect or or to give a great tax shelter to folks that have owned homesteaded property for a longer period of time. And so that's why we'll get calls of people. I bought this property and I'm paying 6 times as much in taxes than that person that's next to me that's been under the Save Our Homes cap homesteaded for
Sure.
25 years. So that that's just sort of the way the system is. But we don't really have control over the assessments from the standpoint we can't manipulate it. The mayor
Right.
can't call me, or Ken Hagan can't call me and say, I really want to build that baseball stadium in Ybor City or wherever else they're looking. Can you bump up the assessments? And just again, so they make the decisions at the end once we give them all the information of how much value is out there, and they say, okay, here's our budget. They make the decision whether to keep the millage rate the same, ask for an increase, which they, in some cases, the city of Tampa did a couple of years ago.
Sure.
Or the rollback rate, which would be the rollback rate is something that they have to consider each year, which is the rate of the millage or the tax rate that would accrue the same amount of revenue as the previous year.
Because the values have been increased, you could potentially roll back the millage
And that's
rate
why
and
when
produce
you
the same
look at
revenue.
if folks are watching this or then they have their notice of proposed taxes, they'll say, well, why are there different columns,
Right.
And so there's one column there that would be that what the rate would be should the taxing authority decide only to accrue the amount of revenue that they did the previous year. That's the rollback rate. And then generally there's one of based on last year's rate, and then one for the proposed budget going forward.
So the governor right now in the state
Mm-hmm.
has a big emphasis
Yes.
on reducing property taxes. And I heard the governor say something about how municipalities are like fat and happy right now, right? I mean, we've had a ton of people move here. That's produced incredibly high property values all around the state.
Right.
And so because of that, we have a lot of, high level of
Right.
revenue. And so the conversation now is, do you need to keep the tax levels the same because we have these high values? Again, your office is not to give, well, your office is made to give information probably to the state on those values, but
Yeah.
it's not, in regards to how much you should charge people.
Misunderstanding may be that that's our fault, right? That the property appraisers are the ones that have done that. But again, it's the market has done what the market's done, and you're involved in it, so you understand that. So that's important for folks to know. And again, as a part of messaging for me, we are regulated, and we have to it's based on the Constitution and state statutes. So, we don't artificially create, and let's face it, there's been a lot of sales, there's been a lot of velocity in the market, right? And what have you. So to your point, the idea that the municipalities and the taxing authorities at the local level are fat and happy, well, they have had more revenue
Yeah.
over the past decade or more.
It seems like a good idea and concept, right? Where, a younger person who's maybe around my age, who's starting a family, wants to buy a home, they are going to be obligated to pay far more than if you had bought a house 30
that's
years
the
ago.
inherent inequity in the system. That was the unintended consequences of the Save Our Homes
Right.
cap, but that's not going away. So, and let's be honest for a minute, which is crazy, right? these days, fat and happy, all of government has been fat and happy. So the state government, up until this, last couple of years when they found their fiscal responsibility gene, were spending a great deal of money and record. And I've spent 8 years in the state legislature, so I can speak to this a little bit. But they were passing, record budgets. Now, that for whatever reason now, and I like it really is kind of conflated. And there's I call it the 3 Ps. There's politics, there's policy, and there's practicality when we start talking about this. The politics is pretty simple. If you want to appeal to, people's visceral reaction, and you say taxes are too high, we all agree.
Sure.
I don't, I'm mad at myself every year when I send myself a notice of proposed taxes. That's really kind of that's the politics is easy on this. This is really more about spending than it is where the revenue is coming from. So they finally kind of come around to that point that now they're going with Doge Florida and the CFO going around and taking a closer look. I will tell you, I don't, as I've already spoken to, I think our office is a good record on that account. and I don't think that anybody disagrees with the idea that we should be accountable to our spending, you know, or that our government should be efficient in that. I think it's a little bit scary when you start immediately throwing out fraud and abuse as part of that, because it plays to that lowest common denominator that immediately, because if you're talking about fraud, you're talking about intentional
Sure.
kind of criminal activity. But that being said, we're all okay with that. The reality of it is that there's, like as I said, there's two large revenue sources in the state of Florida, and there's $55 billion plus of revenue that's accrued each year statewide with property taxes. You can find some percentage of cuts at the local level or in government that will that you know that local governments could cut those things and say, but I don't know that all of that 55
Right.
billion is what you're going to find. So that's where the politics is kind of easy. Then comes the policy, and so it's sort of like the governor and others have said, well, I'm the grandfather and I have the poopy diaper, I was fine playing with the kid, but now you
Time to return them.
you change it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so now I think the legislature is wrestling with this because on the one hand, how much of this has to be backfilled, and how do you do that? Whether you raise sales tax 10, 12%, and we can argue about that, whether that's a good idea because it's regressive. And if you're the Panhandle, you go to Georgia to buy your car, whatever, and it's very cyclical based on different things,
tourism, et cetera.
Right. And also it's largely regulated at the state level. So I don't know if you want the city of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and others going to the state every year and having to beg for their money.
Right.
That's an awful lot of power coming out of Tallahassee as well. At least in theory, with property taxes, you can come to your county commissioner, city council, and complain that your pothole's not being filled or whatever. You may or may not get redress, but at least you can do that. And so it's a complicated issue. So again, when you start to get to the policy of it, and then the practicality. Now, what you're seeing now is the discussion's morphing largely, Garrett, towards doing something for homeowners, for homesteaded property owners.
Right.
Now, I would argue that that's largely because they're the voters. So you're going to get the most political bang for the buck by doing that. The reality is they're the least affected. Now, again, I'm not minimizing it because we're all feeling economic insecurity, all of us. And largely, most of that is more about property insurance than it is this. And I can tell you from our office, we're not getting, the doors aren't being beaten down by homeowners that feel like they're being crushed by property tax, because if they're homesteaded, they're feeling modest increases.
But the problem is a guy like me who bought his house last summer.
And so that's where I think the real, and I'm hopeful, and I've had these kinds of discussions with some of the people who are on the select committee and others, that if they truly want to put something, they can go politically put something outrageous on the ballot.
Yeah.
And 60%, in North Dakota, they'd had an effort to do away with all property taxes, and it failed. But if they're contemplative about it and they put a serious proposal forward, something like that. So
Yes.
I've suggested things like, what if you phased in the reset? Because again, if you're a new home buyer, first time home buyer, like you say, and you want to buy a home, and the previous homeowner were paying, after being in this house for 20 years, and so they're paying $1,500 in property taxes. And so based on an assessed value that's artificially low because of the Save Our Homes cap, now you buy it, and that same home that they bought for $150,000 20 years ago is now worth $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's going to be a reset to the adjusted market value of $1 million minus any exemptions that you may have. And then you're going to start the cap all over again, but your taxes are going to go from $1,500 to $7,500 or $10,000. And that's a big hit, right? So, one of the ideas is, could we phase that in so that for the new home buyer, you only pay a third, and a third over the 3 years? So now, again, most of you are going to pay it through escrow anyhow. You can kind of build that into your pro forma going forward. And hopefully that new home buyer 3 years from now is going to be doing a little bit better, a little more settled, and have a little bit better salary, what have you. There are serious ideas out there. I threw out an idea to couple a property tax refund that would more than cover the average increase in property value and property taxes each year for a median home price, which generally is between $150 and say $400 a year. based on $400,000 median home price that could be paid through every year. There's discretionary funds that the legislature puts in the budget at the end. That's how they fund these various different tax-free weeks
Right.
that they have, and things like that, community projects. So say if you're couple that to insurance increases. So if your property insurance goes up 15%, you can get a $500 refund that's going to more than cover the increase in your property taxes, plus maybe some of the increase that you had.
Mhm.
There are some serious ideas out there. I'm hopefully they'll discuss some of those. I think it's difficult. I mean, if you do away with all homesteaded properties, property taxes, that's a big number. So, and it disproportionately affects certain communities.
Do you know the percentage? I mean, if this was a pie, how much of the tax revenue
It
from
it,
property taxes is homesteaded,
it varies.
primary?
So it may be as much as 50 or 60%
Wow.
in the city of Tampa,
Wow.
or like a bedroom community like Temple Terrace, where you don't have a lot of commercial. You
Sure.
have mostly homesteaded properties. Some communities will be less. Some,
Meaning for that particular municipality, if that was eliminated,
Yeah.
that could be devastating.
it could be very difficult to try to figure that out. And again, you can look at it. It varies a bit, but somewhere between 50-60% of property taxes are public safety.
Right.
So because that's and so you're gonna and I know that's part of the discussion that's going on out there as the governor and the CFO are going out there and beating the drum about this issue, that they're already kind of saying, oh, well, people are, the local communities are going to come out and say, well, it's going to affect your public safety. Well, that's what they're going to say.
Sure.
And
Well,
so,
it is. I mean,
so
they're
we
not wrong.
need to have a serious discussion about this. Take the politics out of it. I think we can all agree that there are some reforms that can be made. My role, and this is not self-serving in that I'm the property appraiser, because I think we would still exist one way or the other.
Sure.
Is to educate and hopefully that we can have a real discussion, outside of the political realm of what is legitimate property tax reform that I think is needed.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
we can agree.
the logic makes sense to me. I mean, I bought an expensive home. My wife and I probably overextended ourselves to get what we needed to build a family and be long term. I think we bought a house that sort of could be our forever home. That comes with a higher price. That comes with a higher tax bill.
Right.
That's our choice as a family. But I also, when you look at the homestead exemption, I think that $50,000 exemption has been in place for a long time.
It has, and it's
And
grown from 5,000 to 25,000, now up to 50,000.
but 50,000 from what I remember has been in place 10 years, 8
Yeah, and that's
years.
the trick of anything that you place in statute that's a set amount, because I mean that $20 bill, that my father may
Well,
may have given me in 1982 to go see a movie,
Yeah.
isn't worth $20 today. So now we did pass constitutional amendments, so we're indexing the homestead exemption to inflation every year now. So if inflation is 7%, then your homestead exemption will.
It would have been nice 5 years ago because inflation.
Yeah, it would have. It's funny how that happened after the fact. That's part of it. I think that I've looked at it, and since like 1934 or something, when the homestead exemption was created, if you kind of index it to inflation, it's going to be a much higher number. So that may be one of the things that'll be suggested on the ballot. Is that we raise it? Is that we raise that? Whatever it may be, 150,000, 300,000, 500,000.
Well, it's got to be higher. I
Right.
think that when you look at a $50,000 exemption, that's great if your home value is $300,000. This episode is brought to you by the official remodeler of the TBD podcast, Kohler House Remodeling Company. Built on the belief that every homeowner deserves a premium experience, Kohler House is redefining high-end home remodeling with their commitment to integrity, craftsmanship, and quality communication. Their work speaks for itself, from condos in the towers of Channelside to 100-year-old homes in South Tampa, creating spaces that are both stunning and functional. What sets Kohler House Remodeling Company apart is their dedication to not only transforming homes into beautiful spaces, but to elevating the standard of residential general contracting. From concept to completion, every detail is handled with care, ensuring a process that's as smooth as the results are impressive. To learn more, check out our partner's website at kohlerhouse.net, KOHLERHAUS.net. This episode is sponsored by Chancy Architecture and Interior Design. Rooted in the heart of Ybor City for over 35 years, Walt Chansey and his team are trailblazers in their field. Beyond their work across the United States and the Bahamas, Chansey has shaped some of the most iconic residential and commercial spaces that serve as gateways to Cigar City, including Casa Marti and Casa Gomez. What sets Chansey Design apart is their ability to preserve the soul and character of historic buildings while seamlessly integrating modern design and functionality. They blend tradition with innovation, creating spaces that honor the past while meeting today's needs. Check out their work at www.chanseydesign.com. When you start talking about now the median home price is $400,000, you said in Hillsborough County, probably going up as we grow, has increased. Well, you tell me if you know. What was the median price when you first took office?
Oh boy,
12
I
years
have
ago.
this on my desk. But it's raised. It was less than $200,000.
Less than $200,000. So you've seen an over 100%
Mm-hmm.
rate of inflation on the median home price.
Yes.
Can you look up, David? Could we see the year Homestead was set at $50,000? I'm sure. 12 years ago, 10
That
years
would have
ago.
been under the Christ administration. So this was probably 2008, went in effect 2009. Is that right? I'm trying.
Damn,
to,
we got Esther on the keyboard right now. Shout
I'm
out
trying
Esther.
to remember because that may have been at the same time that portability came about.
But it's like that $50,000. My point is, it doesn't do as much as it was intended to do when that was passed. So
No.
I could see a really fair argument for increasing that.
Yes.
Eliminating property taxes as a whole, I think that's obviously too far. How do you pay for public safety, like we talked about? But maybe
I think they've talked about that.
2007 was it?
Yeah, it went into effect like 2008. I think.
What is it? So that sounds right though, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
something like that. Clearly prices have increased since then. And I think that's the entire genesis of this argument is, hey, look, home prices are extremely expensive. People are getting crushed. I mean, I was sticker shocked at my bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, my choice to buy an expensive home for my family.
And again, that's
you know.
based on the reset. So if you looked at you bought an existing home, right? Not a new
Well,
build.
so I got hammered. So I bought.
Did you call us?
No, but listen, I bought my house from a retired Green Beret. His tax bill was like $800.
Well, he was right. So he had various exemptions.
He
based on his
had
service.
disability. I mean, he had, and by the way, awesome policy.
Right.
A guy like that, a veteran who's disabled, can have. I think it's like 100%.
Mm-hmm. Depending on the level of that they were.
I mean, he here he is in a home that has a really, really high valuation, and he only has to pay $600 or $800 a year. Great policy for people like that.
Which is interesting, by the way, because this is not something that I would have taken on, but out of I believe Jacksonville a couple of years ago, the property appraiser came to the legislature with the idea. It didn't go very far because people were complaining because there were folks that like generals that were living in multi-million-dollar houses.
Paying nothing, yeah.
Right? That got some kind of a designation, and we're paying nothing. But most of us said, don't touch that.
It's a group of people that I feel are sort of separate from the rest of the pack.
I don't disagree.
These are military people that are serving our country. They need to have protections in place so that they can. It is a weird line to cross when you start talking about like a house on the beach or whatever. That's $4 million. Something like that is a little different. But I think in general, yeah, like I love the idea of increasing the homestead limit as a start. We'll have to see how it all shakes out, but it does seem like the governor is on this. You kind of consistently see him speaking about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, we go into the politics of it and the rhetoric. I understand all that. I've been, involved in it a long time. Some of the stuff about I think we have to be realistic. This idea, and some people, again, it depends on your sort of mindset. But the kind of this idea that you rent your home from the government and those kind, I don't know. I mean, we all pay for services, and the other thing side of this is okay. So we have to also think about the concept of property taxes being fair and equitable. So we all kind of feel the pain because you'll hear that we'll have people call from, and I understand this. So let's say you're a senior, you live in Sun City Center, you're like, my kids graduated from school a long time ago. Why do I pay school taxes? It's a legitimate argument, but the reality of it is we want to try to spread the pain somewhat across. We all pay for services. Now we may hopefully our home never burns down, but we pay for the hope that if that ever happened, that somebody's going to come and put the fire out. When you start to do these kinds of things, when you start to pick and choose the winners. So let's say if you say we're going to do away with property taxes for properties that are homesteaded, you and I, we're good. Okay. I'm happy about that. But the reality of it is, I don't know what the argument for, if you start saying, equal protection, well, I rent my home and they're passing an additional, whatever the property taxes are into my rent. Or if you own an investment property, well, you're still paying taxes. Well, why, I own property and I'm being penalized because I don't own a homesteaded property, and it's a tax shift at that point. And if you say, well, the cost of doing business as a government, you can cut some of it, but it's still going to be there. Does that mean the government passes more fees and other things? We don't talk enough about non-ad valorem or non-real estate fees and taxes you pay on your tax bill. So when you get your notice of proposed taxes, you're looking at just the real estate portion of it. It doesn't include the cost of getting your garbage picked up every week. It doesn't include stormwater fees. Gosh, we know about those things after storms last year.
Yeah.
All the other things, and those, gosh, I don't know. I mean, what else are we paying for out there? Red light cameras. If you get caught, you pay that.
All the above.
All of the above. People are getting nickeled and dimed by the local, which frankly, if I were in charge, I'd take a good hard look at all of that stuff. But
sure,
a lot of those things a lot of these things are passed by the local governments, and nobody even knows that they're raising those things, right? So they're going to try to find their money somewhere else. So do they start to increase those fees so you're still going to pay on the back end somewhere else? There'll be a tax shift to some extent as well. And the funny thing is that it's interesting to me. People don't mind paying taxes for services if they believe that they're worthy. They just want to make sure that their money's being spent correctly.
Right.
So at the same time, in the last election, clearly there was a message sent, and we're living that message right now, politically with the outcome of the election. Thankfully, I'm still here. Thank you, voters. They sent a message, but at the same time, in Hillsborough County, the one message was being sent on one end, right? They reinstituted one tax and created an increased tax for schools for teachers. So again, there's this kind of this dichotomy, which people will have to kind of think through going forward about that. And so it's an interesting discussion. I hope that that it can be more realistic and that folks, and there's a lot of smart people in the legislature that are wrestling with this on how to actually implement some of the ideas that are being put forward in a reasonable manner.
Yeah.
And that are practical in the long run.
Well, I think the value exchange conversation is bigger now than it ever was before. Like you said earlier about the person in Sun City Center that doesn't have children in the school system. Why should I pay for that? There's also the equity of and the equality of, well, if you live in a $5 million house and I live in a $100,000 house, but we both have one car and we're sort of using the same services, you shouldn't be necessarily penalized a certain extent because you live in a more expensive house. Like you just have the equal millage, right? That's sort of how the tax collector has that equality amongst the tax base. Also too, you could even break it down to an individual association, like a condominium building, right? Like the penthouse unit sometimes can pay as much as the smaller unit. Usually they might have like unit A pays this much, unit B pays this much. But if it's one family living in there and that same family uses the pool just as much, you kind of always have to have that equality among the taxpayers. And if
the common elements are taxed separately.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if you only had the people that used it pay, it wouldn't make economical sense to sustain those roads, those schools. Like I have young kids. I don't have kids in school. If I didn't pay, that's more someone else would have to pay.
Correct.
Right. And so you'd create this situation where it's so expensive. If we all could spread it out on a more even basis, like it is, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's why it's, I guess I'll say, tolerable or has been tolerable. I think the conversation is bubbling up now because the numbers are so much bigger than they're as big as they've ever been.
Well, and again, overall economic insecurity. If you're paying $10 for a pound of ground beef and persistent inflation, and again, it's interesting that the word inflation is kind of a catch-all, but remember the inflation is only a measure of how much the prices are increasing. Not once they've increased, they don't seem to come back down. I mean, gas prices still are persistently, what they are. And so I think that the incredible insurance increases, property insurance increases we saw, which have maybe slowed down a little bit with some of the things the legislature's done, but still there. The cost of energy, I mean, everything. And so, and taxes are a tax is the 4-letter word. That's a 3-letter word. It's an easy target, but it's a much larger kind of discussion. So, interestingly
It's a
enough,
good discussion to have for the state, though, as we grow. And
sure.
now we have 24 million people. Hillsborough County has like 1.6 million. I mean,
yeah.
it's a good time to talk about the fiscal responsibilities of the state and of the citizens and the tax and how it all interacts going forward. I think it's completely appropriate. How
Yeah.
it shakes out.
Well, yeah,
we'll see.
absolutely. And interestingly enough, I think that along those lines, it's always important to have those discussions. But I think we have to be realistic too, that the cost of, in the same way as individually, when we sit around the kitchen table and try to figure out, can we take a vacation? Can we not? How much groceries can we buy? It's different, but it's still somewhat the same. The cost of doing business for government has gone up too. So we've got to factor that in to some extent. And interestingly, I had a discussion with the mayor or I was on a panel with the mayor of Temple Terrace this week. And so when he's tried to look at certain things, like he wanted to cut back garbage pickup, like, to once a week. And like the neighborhoods were like crazy.
Yeah.
No way. Right. But it would have saved a lot of money for the city. And then ultimately they could have passed that on to the taxpayers. But no, we don't want that snow. We want it picked up twice. So you can't, to some extent, we've got to have, I think that's the very sober discussion needs to be,
Yeah.
all right, we're going to have a certain level of spending. What are we spending it on? Right.
And
so right now people are about, to me, and what I'm as personally interested in is, my coaching background, what the blocking and tackling, the nuts and bolts, the things that affect you on a daily basis, the pothole that's still there, that stuff. They want to see the spending that's on on the necessities.
Any organization that,
and so I think that's what the taxing authorities, whether it be the city, the county, and others, and a lot of the discussion, they're talking so much about the cities and the counties. Remember, taxing authorities, there's a bunch of other taxing authorities out there, like the Port Authority, Aviation Authority, school board, that all are part of this as well, that need to be brought into that discussion.
Absolutely. You mentioned you were a part of the Florida legislature. What's your, and then you said you're a coach, your nickname's coach.
Yeah.
How'd you become the property appraiser? Like, talk to me about your sort of origin
Well,
story.
my origin, I was born and raised here. I'm 5th generation. And my great-grandfather was last mayor of West Tampa, became part of the city of Tampa in 1925, so
Wow.
100 years ago. Ironically, I was in
great-grandfather?
Great-grandfather.
Okay.
100 years ago, the West Tampa became part of the city of Tampa. Temple Terrace was created, so it's interesting. My cousin Lou Delaparte was a state senator as well. I was always fascinated with public service and politics. It was sort of in the family, although I was first in my family to graduate from college. I went to Tampa Catholic and graduated from Princeton University. I had a Z at the end of my name and could knock people down, so they let me come. And so. But I always had this great opportunity. I was blessed to go away and came back. I always wanted to come back to this community and give back to the community, and sort of led me over the course of time. I've always worked, a real job, both with Hillsborough County and Planning and Growth Management and the Planning Commission, and then in the private sector as well. And then I coached high school football at Tampa Catholic for many years, and also a stint at Jefferson and others. So that's where the coach part of it came from. And I actually had one of my bosses at Hillsborough County. Came to me one time and he said, I don't know if I should say this, but he gave me $1. And he said, I said, what's this for? And he said, well, this is your first campaign contribution. I said, I'm not running for anything, Steve. And he said, you will. And so I put it in an envelope and put campaign contribution. I put it in my drawer. And it was the first $1 I ever deposited with another $99 of my own dollars to start my first campaign, account. Interestingly, it was probably an illegal campaign contribution, but I think we're okay. But long story short, I moved on. I was working with the Builders Association as their government affairs coordinator, and I had a gentleman call me and say, "I need to come in and talk to you. Your name keeps popping up. You know everybody in town. You've got a great history here and that kind of thing. And people, and I want to talk to you about the state house race." And so he came in and Garrett, literally, I handed him a list of paper with a piece of paper with 5 names on it. And I said, "I'm glad you're here because I think all these 5 people would be great to run for that seat." And he looked at me like, you idiot, I'm here to talk to you about running. So that's really how it started.
How old were you at the time?
This was 1997, 32, 33 years old, I guess.
Wow.
That's how it started. I called a good friend of mine, Anna Cruz, we all know, and who, obviously was involved. And we had kidded about it at some over drinks one night when we were talking that I was with her mother Janet and Bob Buckhorn and some other people, and they all said, and they're like, "You need to run for office someday." And I'm like, "Oh, whatever." And then we were kidding about it. Well, I said, "Yeah, I'm going to run, and when I do, you'll be my campaign manager, right?" And so she said, "Okay." And she was 20s. And so I called her. I said, this came to my attention. What do you think? And she goes, "Well, come to the house." And we literally started that night.
Wow.
And I ran against an incumbent that very well financed, and we were fortunate enough to win. And the rest is history. I was in the state legislature for 8 years, term limited out, from 1998 to 2006.
Wow.
Came back. Worked in the private sector a bit, then was appointed by then Governor Charlie Crist to Department of Children and Families. Worked there for a couple of years. Then went, the Great Recession came along. There were some cuts in the state government, and I worked in the private sector doing some other things for a while. And then the opportunity to run for a property appraiser came about. Some people called me and said, "You should really do this.
Yeah.
You have a history." My brother had worked in the office many years. I knew a lot of the folks there. I had the background in legislature. I had been part of running a very large state agency with the Department of Children and Families for Pasco and Pinellas County. So I kind of had that. It was kind of the perfect mesh for me between. There's a political aspect every 4 years, but it's not partisan in nature, and it's more administrative. So it's about running a good office, and being good stewards of people's dollars and doing the right thing. And so it appealed to me, and the rest is history. I've been there ever since.
And that ambition, right? I mean, because it's not necessarily an office where, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can do a whole lot in terms of policy, in terms of like saving people money, like we mentioned before. Sort of the powers of your office are administrative to assess property value. But I would imagine you had ambitions when you were running and you wanted to get in. And you said in the beginning that leaning out the office was sort of a part of your platform.
Well,
more efficient.
I think it was part practically and practically necessary, because when I came in, we had somewhere between 25 and 30% of the office that was in drop, so the deferred retirement plan. So there was a generational change coming, and so we had to make a choice whether to try to hire a bunch of people, or get the folks before they left to kind of impart their knowledge to other folks. But there was an opportunity for me. It was about maximizing the human capital people we had there, and then looking at other technologies and ways to reinvent the office. We had this the saying to rethink, reinvent, and reinvigorate the office. And I'd like to say I came up with it on my own, but it was on a bar of soap, and I liked it. So literally. And that's what we kind of did. So we looked at all the processes, how we could apply technology, cross-training. And so instead of growing the size of the office, we looked at, and organically, it's more difficult. It was more difficult. And the nature of the property appraiser's office was becoming more technical, more, about using, information technology and other technologies that are out there. You mentioned AI. Of course, that wasn't there yet. And less, hands-on grunt work. And so I think that's allowed us to do a lot of those kinds of things, and looking at where it made sense to do public-private partnerships. We have a number. We're really on the bleeding edge of co-developing certain technologies that are now being used in other property appraisers' offices throughout the country and throughout the world. Actually, we've had other countries visit us as well, and also to the extent that we could farm out, certain functions, whether it be administrative functions, as well as our commercial team. We largely have partnered with a private firm to do a lot of the information gathering and helping us put the numbers together. So because you really can't find the level of commercial appraiser to keep them long term and compensate them and train them to the level to do the kind of mass appraisal in that area that you could do in the past. And so it's really thinking outside the box and reinventing, government. And to the extent of policy, we have been on the forefront of some, policy changes that I think have been very, very positive for property owners, taxpayers, because there is a handshake with the legislature, because everything we do is enabled through the legislature. And to the extent that, although I'm not in the policy realm, sometimes I miss it every once in a while. I look at it and go, gosh, if I were still in Tallahassee, I would do this or whatever. It's kind of easy, from the outside looking in. But I still kind of keep my hand in that, and from time to time, provide some ideas. But yeah, I'm blessed. I am absolutely blessed, and we'll see what hopefully, depending on what happens over the next couple of years, I'll still be needed.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that conversation about efficiency in that office is relevant for two reasons. One, that the policy conversation right now about efficiency and, Florida Doge, right? And all these conversations about fiscal responsibility in government, but also just the inflation, like we talked about earlier. I mean, the pressure on Floridians is higher now than it ever was.
Yeah.
Insurance and
our office actually, when you triangulate, and the Department of Revenue keeps this statistic between the number of properties we have, the 570,000 properties, the number of employees, and you figure out the cost of per employee for each parcel. We're number one every year out of the 67 counties. And it's really funny.
You're safe. You're
well, yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, and every year it's kind of a little thing between all of us property appraisers. Like, how do you do that? And so we're proud, but we keep track of those kinds of things.
How do you do that? What do you attribute that to?
Again, I think the things that I spoke to.
Yeah.
Of leveraging, your human capital, cross training. So, for example, when I first came in, and we were coming out of the Great Recession, and so the economy was starting to perk up, the market was starting to heat up, and so when I met with all our department heads, and the consistent theme was, we've got to hire a bunch of people, right? We've got to hire folks. But then I kind of looked at how siloed our office was, and so, for instance, I instituted this idea of customer service centric office, which is more of a private sector term, but that we're all customer service, right? And so we had a particular group of people that were dedicated to do nothing but customer service. Well, the nature of is very cyclical. So right now, with trim noses going out, we get a lot of phone calls, we get a lot of inquiries about different things. But the rest of the year, then there's a period of time that when people are filing before, say, March 1st, when deadlines come up for filing for exemptions, we get very busy when tax bills go out in November. But there's a certain amount of downtime where we're not necessarily getting a lot of customer service calls or folks at our offices are calling. Now it's more online or calls. But these same people were answering questions about a wide range of things within the office. So my thought was, well, if they have this idle time because there's not a customer sitting in front of them or they're not getting a phone call, then why can't they be processing applications for homestead exemptions? Given the fact they answer questions about homestead exemptions, they know how it works. So in that way, and plus it's going to give them a greater skill set, and and so we have folks that were, quote, customer service people that are now appraiser threes or senior appraisers that didn't have that career path originally, and so I think that's how we've been able to. At the same time, that's the human capital side of it, but then it's also looking at the processes and where we can apply. There was duplication of certain work. So if you have a certain thing, if somebody pulls a permit to do something, to put in a pool, and they're also, let's say they're a green belted piece of property, and when I came in, you might have a situation where somebody would go out to Plant City and review the property for their green belt application, and then 2 weeks later, a different person would come out and look at their pool,
Right.
they could both do that. They could
Sure.
one trip instead of two. A lot of that kind of stuff, has allowed us, I think, to become more modest in terms of our workforce. But our workforce is work very, very hard. They make me look good every day. But at the same time, applying technology and different ways of doing business. The last thing I wanted to hear when I came in was, well, we've always done it. Why are we doing that? Well, we've always done it that way. Now, why have we done it that way? Does it still make sense 20, 30 years later?
And that efficiency is why you've gone from, I think you said 113 employees in 2013.
134 to
under 100.
Under 100.
Under
I think
100.
actually active under 90, but we're in the process of hiring a few people. So somewhere around 94.
Let me ask you this. So property appraiser, and I'm sure the reason is the state legislature requires the position to be elected, but why would that be an elected position? Shouldn't that be like
That's a good question.
a staff position that is?
Here's and I think the answer to this, and I asked the same question
Sure.
back when I was in legislature and otherwise. You want your property appraiser to be an independent constitutional officer. Again, so that there's no question impropriety. And this has gone on. So say Miami-Dade was the last of the counties to finally accept an elected property appraiser. They were sort of, even they were still elected and still treated as though they were an elected staff member. The reason being is that then there's no question of a handshake between the level of assessment and it could go either way.
Sure.
So depending, say the county commission, if our budget was, now it's a pass through the county commission, the Department of Revenue looks at our budget. If the county commission was not happy with us or trying to put pressure one way or the other, and I'm not, this is
hypothetical.
This is hypothetical in the abstract. I'm not talking about any individual, but let's say there's a particular, political bent one way or the other, or a particular thing that the people want to have happen. If our budget was under them, if I was an independent constitutional officer, and the people ultimately decided who the property appraiser was, in theory, the county commission could say, "Hey, we need your assessments to be lower, or higher."
Or even without saying, if you're a staff member, you're sort of like, well, I got to do what my bosses say, kind of.
Yeah,
thing.
and so that's the concept, and that's why that we have the independent constitutional officers, whether it be the supervisor of elections, tax collector, clerk of circuit court, myself, and the sheriff as well, and state attorney, and others, because that way there's independence and there's no sense of impropriety that
Sure.
we could be pressured one way or the other.
And then in that same sort of logic train, what about the county administrator? That could almost be an elected position where it's like the mayor of Hillsborough County.
Yeah, and
some
some municipalities and some counties have that.
Sure.
Miami-Dade has a mayor, and there have been efforts over the years to create a county mayor. It hasn't happened. Here.
I haven't looked that deep into it, but it seems like the way it works now is pretty efficient. Like you get that person who's the administrator who's just dialed in on pushing forward the policies of the direction of the
day-to-day
commission
operations
and day to day, and they're just dialed in
from time
on that.
to time. They get sideways with each other, and that
Sure.
there's the politics creeps in. But I think that by and large, it works.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Let's talk about storms. Let's talk about what is it called? The letters. What's the acronym?
For
You mentioned it.
DR 465.
Yeah, but there's an acronym for it. What is it? FLIR? What did you say?
No, I think it was the DR 465.
No, but there's a 4-letter word in regards to the letters.
I'm not sure what that is.
Damn it.
I thought it was DR
I should
465.
have wrote it down.
So
Well,
I
it
mean,
probably
bottom
is.
line is, so we had the two storms last year, and so there's really there's a number of ways that we interface with folks, property owners, as a result of that.
Oh, NFIP. What did you say? NIPF?
That's the National Flood Insurance Program. That's the 50% rule. That's the FEMA rule.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
That's
Okay.
what it was. Okay.
Sorry.
So, we'll get to, because I'm old and I'll lose my train of thought. But, so first of all, last year we had the two storms and catastrophic events, and the state, smartly in legislation now has passed. It used to be that when I was there and then subsequent to that, if there was a catastrophic event, a storm, they would have to go into special session and pass some legislation to kind of be able to help property owners in the aftermath of the storm that weren't covered generally by legislation or protected. Now they've kind of codified a lot of those same things that they were doing every time they would have to go in there. So one of those things is you can get, if you have a catastrophic event, and it's larger than just tropical storms or floods or a tornado, any catastrophic event. So if your home burns down, things like that, because in theory, because of the fact that our assessments are based on January 1st, if your home burns down on January 2nd, it used to be that couldn't be taken into account until your net to the following year, even though you couldn't live there and the home was uninhabitable or whatever. Now it's covered under the state statute that says if your home is uninhabitable for a period of 30 days during a particular year, you can get a prorated tax refund for the period of time that you're out. So we processed and are still processing a handful. I think that the deadline's about to come up. I think it's September 14th. Is that the date? What's that? The 12th. Okay, the 12th. I was close. And so we processed 3,500 or so of those.
Great program, by the way.
So people got some refund for the period of time that they were out.
Is there a max? Is like, can I say, oh, I've been out 3 months or 5 months or?
Well, it depends. Well, from the date of the storm. So the storm, I don't remember the exact dates last year, but say the storms were in October. So up until January 1st, you could be out a period of time.
Wow.
Some people were out 30 days, some 60,
Sure.
And you have to give the information of how long you've been out and those kinds of things. So that was one thing we did. They had like 20,000 in Pinellas County. It's crazy. So that was part of what our charge last year to do, and going into this year was that DR 465. The other portion is then to determine, based on the amount of damage that a particular piece of property had, based on the storms, as of January 1st, 2025, if they were still damaged, to adjust their value based on that. And that's been, so hopefully if anybody's listening to this and for some reason they look at their notice of proposed taxes and they say, well, there's our value is the same or gone up, but we were either out of our home or it was substantially damaged, and we didn't make an adjustment, let us know. I mean, we did the best we could to determine where those properties were, based on FEMA information and a lot of other things and field work. But it's not, there's a chance that we may have missed it here and there. We're getting a handful of those calls.
How can people get in touch with you in your office?
Yeah, they can call our office at 272-6100 or go on our website, the Property Appraiser website. You have it up there. So
hcpafl.org.
And send an inquiry and say, hey, listen, I looked at my notice of proposed taxes and you didn't make an adjustment and my home is still, I'm still not back in my home.
Pull up that article, David, about those letters that went out in Hillsborough County, because it was a lot, right? Because I think Tampa Bay Times put up an article and they had a map and they put like where every letter went to. It was a significant amount of properties.
Yeah, and so that was a little bit different. So there were letters that went out based on the 50% rule and other things as well. What we did is we did a bunch of different ways to try to reach out to the community so that they would know to get in touch with us. So we did everything from text messaging to cards that we followed up with, both for the DR 465 for homes that we knew were uninhabitable, as well as just in general homes that were damaged. We did everything that we could, social media, different ways to try to reach out to folks as well. I know that there were certain letters went out that weren't necessarily from ours, that they were based more on the and that's, again, so we kind of use some of that data.
Now this specifically here, this article that we have pulled up, at least 10,000 properties received letters saying they could have substantial damage. This is not your office. This is a FEMA thing.
Yes. And I think the city or the county sent those out as well.
But your office is looking at this data.
But we
here.
have that data.
Sure.
Yeah. And so that gave us a pretty good idea of where to send our cards as well. And also we could piggyback off that to kind of get, in some cases, with the damage assessment that went on, and we were part and parcel of that, going out with the FEMA teams after the storm to kind of know where the damage was and to be able to kind of estimate what the damage is. We also pick up permits. So if somebody had fixed their home and permitted it, that's another trick. By January 1st, it wouldn't necessarily be reflected this year. Now we then get into the 110% rule and the other things that the state rule. But
So those people might receive bills that they need to contact your office and say, hey, my bill shouldn't be this high because I was out of my home and I had to do a renovation.
yes, yeah,
This
absolutely.
tax bill,
If
2025.
yeah, if they receive their notice of proposed taxes and they take a look at it and the adjustment isn't there, or they think there should be one, if they had damage we didn't know about it,
Sure.
perhaps, yeah, by all means, let us know. We'll take a look. If we have to send, we just yesterday we sent out a couple of folks to take a look at individual properties. Now, in some cases, it may not rise to the level of or they may have, but again, I mean, to some extent, they have to document the damage.
Sure.
But, sir, I mean, we're not in the revenue business. We're in the business of trying to get things right. And to that end, this thing called the Value Adjustment Board process, which people, if they disagree with their assessment one way or the other, or maybe an exemption that they believe they should have received that they didn't, or one that we removed based on information that we have, of those, we may get, it varies in the low end, 2,800 up to 4,000 or so of those out of 570,000 properties in a given year. We're going to take a second look at those things. 85% of those value adjustment board petitions, we're going to satisfy one way or the other. We'll work with folks and either satisfy, this is why we did it, and they'll say, okay, that's okay, or we'll make an adjustment. We're not, we don't win and lose at Value Adjustment Board. We try to work with folks. Again, we do the best that we can, but it's important for folks to know they should never be concerned about. We've had people say, well, I don't want to call the property appraiser's office because they're gonna raise my assessment, or we're not an adversarial relationship. We want to get it right, and we want to answer your questions. Now, there's certain times in which people may not accept the answer, but we're going to work with folks as best we can, because that's philosophically where I am, and that's where our office should be.
And so it says here in the article, and again, this is a letter that was sent out by the federal government.
Yes.
So specific to this, it says recipients have told elected officials in passionate public testimony the assessments are wildly off. And that's people that have damage and they want to fix their home, but they're unable to because there's too much damage.
And that was
you hit the 50%
right,
rule.
And that was more in Pinellas County than Hillsborough.
Sure. And we should tell people what the 50% rule is. Could you explain that to people?
As best I can, because it's complicated, but basically it says that the FEMA rule, and the point of this is, over the course of time, the same kind of folks were, this is nationally, we're getting flooded or getting, disproportionately impacted by storms. And it's happening more and more often for whatever reason. And so the 50% rule, I think, was put in place to say, okay, at some point, we can't go back and keep, 6 times over the course of 20 years, we've gone in and rebuilt the property the way it was before, and it's not resilient and it gets blown away again. So the 50% rule, basically, the reason for it is, okay, if you're more than 50% destroyed, then you're going to have to raise the property, maybe raise it up or meet more current code requirements, so that hopefully next time it's more resilient when the storm comes through. And anecdotally, and if you look at what happened in Davis Island as a result of the storms, the properties that were newer, that were either that were raised up or had higher building standards, really didn't have a lot of damage versus or proportionately to the ones that were the older homes that were at grade and were flooded and those types of things. So that's what it is. And to determine that 50% rule, you can either use the property appraiser's assessment, or you can have a private appraiser do an assessment of the value of the home. In most cases, we've told folks that it's better to have the private appraiser. Probably was a good year last year to be a private appraiser because they had a lot more work.
Yeah.
But clearly, again, based on the fact that our assessment is January 1st, the storms happened in October, or was it October? Whenever it was.
Yeah, October.
So the values changed in that period of time. Plus, our values tend to be a fair amount lower than than what a fee appraiser or private appraiser would come up with if you're trying to figure out what 50% is.
Yeah.
So that's our handshake or our part of that.
Sure. And it sort of makes sense, right? Like, all these homes that were built in the 60s and 70s, especially, I mean, in our community in South Tampa and even on the Pinellas side, they were built below the floodplain at that time. And those are the homes that over the course of decades should have some sort of incentive to build new. The problem is the elderly person that's lived there a long time, the person that doesn't have the means to rebuild. That's where it gets really tricky, right? Where
It
you're
does, or maybe it's
forcing
paid off
someone.
and it's self-insured, or you didn't have flood insurance because.
Well, the worst scenario, and I don't know how these rules and policies play effect in areas that are not in flood zones, but the worst scenario, and this happened all across Hillsborough County and in the city, and Pinellas, Sarasota had issues where you've got these properties outside of the floodplain, an ex-flood zone. People don't, they're not required by their mortgage to have flood insurance, and yet they had flooding because of the rain and
Right.
all of that sort of stuff.
No, it was widespread areas that we would never have expected.
Never have
Forest
expected.
Hills, because
Forest Hills.
where the pumps failed, or out
Yeah.
in Plant City, in areas.
Do those rules apply to those homes as well? How does that work if you're not living in a flood zone?
Well, no, if you're not part of the flood insurance program, they wouldn't.
Then you're not. That's not applicable to you. And then also too, I guess the concern for people is, well, damn, if I I live in Beach Park, okay, and this is hypothetical. I own this amazing lot. I've owned it for 20 years. It's paid off, and I've got this letter that says I need to build my home up or brand new. Well, that's super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And if I build this, $1.5 million home on this lot I own in Beach Park, the property appraiser is going to say this is worth $3 million, and then my tax bill is going to be $35,000 a year.
Right.
So
So that's where the 110% rule, which now will go to 130% based on the legislation that was passed last year. What that says is that you can rebuild up to 110% of your original square footage without it changing your assessed value.
that's magic. That's great
Yeah,
policy.
it is good policy. And what we did here, there's some different interpretations from various property appraisers across the state. But what we said was we don't want to penalize folks. So if you build up and you don't finish out, so you just have basically an open air carport underneath the home.
Right.
It's not finished. We're not going to count that against the 110%. Rule. So that gives you more latitude as far as that goes.
That's thousands of square feet typically,
Yeah.
and also very typical for that building style on Davis Islands and in
Right.
areas prone to flooding. They always build up with the garage underneath, so that's huge. And now it's going to go to 130%.
130%.
If it passes, or it's already
It's
passed.
passed. No, it passed last year. I want to say Senate Bill 180, I believe, and also had some other protections against local communities, passing things that were disincentives for the property owners to rebuild or whatever.
Well, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think one of the big fears in the conversation at the time, and I think you even were answering some questions regarding this, was I want to build new, but I'm afraid of that new tax bill.
Yeah.
So this is to mitigate that, and it's
Correct.
130%. So if you're 131%, you are assessed at
Well, it's based on the Save Our Homes cap, right? So anything past that 110 now, or when this coming up 130%, the other stuff would be that the portion that you repaired or replaced up to 110% as a result of the storms, or now 130%, that would stay under the cap. Okay, it wouldn't affect your assessed value. Now, anything over the top of that is the same as if you added if you today went in your home is 2,400 square feet and you added a 500 square foot addition. That's that's new construction. That's going to go on top of the cap in the first year and then get rolled in. So that so if you 131, that 1% over the top of that is going to, and that's probably too little, but
sure.
So if you had a 2,500 square foot home previous to the catastrophic event, and you rebuild 500 plus 30%, whatever that may be, and then you say, as long as I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and add another 600 square feet. That 600 square feet would be additional new construction that would be added at the market rate, whatever that is, to your value.
And the previous amount would stay under the Save Our
Under the
Homes
cap,
under the
yes.
cap. Got it.
Yeah, which is no different than today. If you add an addition, it's gonna be in that first year. It's gonna be valued at at market rate, and then rolled into the cap after that.
The Senate Bill 180 is really buzzing right now. There's so many things in here that obviously are not necessarily applicable to your office, but certainly real estate, certainly development, and we'll see how it all shakes out. I think probably local governments are looking at this all around Florida, trying to figure out a way to dice it up. I think it's meant to have regulations regarding emergencies and make it a little easier and give people more incentive to build where they are, right? And make their properties more resilient. But I think there's also some ambiguous nature to the language of the policy that has local government like, whoa, wait a second, right? Like this might not apply strictly to emergencies.
Yeah, well, ambiguous nature to legislative language is nothing new. And so, before the train leaves the station, sometimes things get added in. So I really, again, we've only really focused on the portion that affects the property appraiser's office, but that's the nature of the beast in Tallahassee.
That's the nature of the beast. Let me wrap up with these sort of questions about just Tampa in general. So you said you're fifth generation. Your great grandfather was the last mayor of West Tampa.
Yeah, his name was Henriquez. He was the January 1st, 1925. There was a ceremony at the El Pasaje Hotel in Ybor City, and West Tampa became part of the city of Tampa.
Were you fortunate enough to grow up with him and talk to him?
I'm old, Garrett, but I'm not that old.
Well, you said he was mayor in 1925.
1925, yeah. I'm not sure exact year, but he passed, I think, in late 30s, early 40s. Well,
late 30s, early 40s. Okay. I was fortunate enough to grow up with my great grandmother, and she was older, but she died, I think, when I was 11 or 12. So I have some memories with her. But you probably talked to your grandfather about him, and some of those stories.
There's a lot of stories, and not just him, but there's a lot of folks that know a lot of the history of West Tampa.
Yeah.
If you sit down with EJ Salcinas for a while,
he was on the show. My gosh,
you can have an hour conversation, 5 minutes with him.
You could have an entire podcast series with
he's
that
a wealth
guy.
He's just a treasure, and so. But I kid because I'm a product of a mixed marriage. My mother was from Ybor City and my father from West Tampa, which was that was like the, the whatever the Romulus and the Capulet, whatever it was. That's like, it was a big deal if you crossed the river. It was kind of scandalous back in the day. But so my roots are deep. I love this community. I love the city, and certainly have seen a lot of change. And
for sure,
some of it for the better, some of it different. I come from an era when you only put black beans on white rice. That was for us. That was culture. So, but we'll see. It's balancing. And I had this discussion recently with someone. I think that our former mayor Bob Buckhorn is fond of saying that, and I know you've had him on the show. That we were losing our best and brightest to wherever, Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte, all that. We're not necessarily losing those folks. In fact, we are attracting a lot of folks, which I think is a good thing. But I think we have to be mindful that the reasons that, in the spirit of this community and what makes it so special and what attracts people here, we don't want those folks to come here and want to turn it into where they came from.
Yeah, agreed.
And because you're a legacy, family. And so how do we balance that?
Yeah.
How do we balance the changes that we see downtown and Water Street and all that kind of really neat urbanization and all that with the spirit that makes this such a great community, the welcoming sense that you can be here 5 days and feel like you've been here 5 months and 5 months,
exactly.
5 generations.
Yeah.
And, and at the same time, balance the needs of the neighborhoods and the needs of people versus the shiny objects,
Right.
It's tough, and hopefully the Bucks win a few games.
Well,
too.
It's looking good so far, but I think it is a tightrope, and it's certainly my greatest fear is that as we grow and develop and we attract people from Charlotte and the Northeast and out West here, they don't know the history. They don't know the stories of our ancestors. And then I wake up one day with my children and your grandchildren and like, well, what is this, Orlando 2.0? Like,
Exactly.
What are we, right? So bringing along with us the stories of the past and the culture we have here in Tampa is, I think, the most important thing as we grow.
And it's tricky and it's difficult.
It
You know,
is because we're
we don't want Tampa to be just in a, you know, like the, you know, the print you have behind you, or some in some museum piece, you know, or you go to some places out in the West and they have a small little section that's like the Wild West town. You know, I don't, you know, that it's compartmentalized.
or that it's just this like Disney World fake version of what
Yeah.
it once was, and I don't think anyone wants that. I forgot to ask you something about some of these larger developments. How do you put a value on something like Water Street?
Well, I mean, again, you try to find similar things. I mean, you know, if to the extent that something's a brand new, you know, we'll look at other areas or other places that have something similar.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so
Hard to find though,
it's
right?
hard to find. But to the extent that like if it's townhomes or residential, you know, then we can
Sure.
kind of look, you know, based on, you know,
Downtown,
price per
Channel
square
Side,
foot and
right.
those kinds of things. Yeah, and we have enough of that now that we have something to go on here.
Right. Was
But
that because that's you've been in office since 2013. That whole project transpired
yeah.
while you were in office. Is that something when you first heard of it, the concept, you and your team are like, okay, how are we going to crack this thing and
We
put a
actually
fair value on it?
in some cases we met with folks. We opened ourselves up to meet with developers of Midtown, developers of
To
and
compare
kind of
and
compare and try to
learn.
get some idea. Again, we couldn't forecast what they were going to be worth,
Sure.
but in some cases, those kinds of developers will come in, you know, as part of their pro forma, they're going to want to sit down and say, what does this look like? And we can't necessarily predict exactly what the tax or what their assessments and ultimately their taxes are going to be. So to the extent that we can, we've got some pretty bright folks that that are able to look at those kinds of things. Again, to be prepared for it.
Sure.
But again, remember, things don't go on the tax roll until they're quote substantially complete, which is really CO. And so we have time to kind of to figure things out. And that's the other thing that people don't understand is people say, well, there's all these cranes downtown and all this development. From the standpoint of the tax authorities, they're not actually going to accrue that revenue until it's complete.
So the people that say, look at all the growth, look at the cranes, where's the money to fix this? Well, you got to give it a few years
And that's the other tricky part because we're historians to some extent. So we can never quite catch up to, you know, the growth. And then when things go bad, fortunately, I haven't had that experience, although this year was flat. Because if the economy goes in the tank, that's a good word for it. I almost used another word. Over the course of time, so let's say back 2007, 2008, whatever the Great Recession started, you get your tax bill based on the value to January 1st of 2025, and your home is worth $750,000. Let's say, this hopefully doesn't, sometime between now and January, you know, the economy, we have something terrible, God forbid. And now your value as of January 1st, you know, you can't, the tax bill for that year, you're going to pay based on January 1st, although you lost value throughout 2025. So we never quite catch up to downturns.
Right.
And when things are really going well, doesn't necessarily reflect, you know, everything all at once. It's kind of, that's the nature of our being historians, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, but isn't there programs, and maybe it's through the tax collector's office, where you can sort of anticipate what your tax bill will be and pay in quarterly to help
Yeah,
alleviate some of that pressure?
Yeah, they have certain ways that you can.
And then you've got the
do that.
discount to pay in
Discount if you
November.
pay in November. And we have a tax estimator on our website, so folks can take a look at that
That's a big one.
and get a sense for what it won't be exact. Now, if you're in the real estate business or you're an individual and you want to know a closer
Sure.
estimation of what your, at least the property portion of your taxes may be, not the ad valorem part, you know, you can call us and we'll look at it
good.
more closely. But generally, that estimator is going to give you an estimate based on 85 to 100% of the sale price. I would always say estimate, go on the high end of that. It shouldn't and wouldn't be as high as that for those purposes. But yeah, the estimator can be a good tool for folks.
And what's a good like little formula, because residential brokers use that a lot. And I know it's hard to say,
Yeah.
but
You saw the
1.5%.
look on my face.
Well, yeah, 1.5%, something like that, of the sale price of the property maybe gives you a Hail Mary into the area of where it could be. $1 million is $15,000, something like that,
Something
maybe.
like that. Yeah.
But where can people find the property tax estimator on your website?
On our website, there's a drop down menu.
Let me shout that out because it's a cool
Yeah,
tool.
so if you look at it, it's here on the quick links. It's in various different places. But if you go down here to the
Tax estimator, it's quick links. It's on the left side of the homepage. And so, boom, you can put in the parcel number, owner
parcel
name,
number, identifying information, the owner's name, address. It's going to give you then.
Now, there's some little language up here people need to read, right, before they 100% rely on this. Of course, it's just an estimate.
And that basically is saying, this is an estimate. If you need something closer, let us know. It also is going to say it doesn't include all of those non-ad valorem things. So, because we'll get calls when the tax bills come in November and say, wait a minute, your trim notice said my taxes this year were going to be $4,000, and I got my bill, it was $5,000. Well, you didn't take into account all those other fees, wastewater, stormwater, garbage pickup, all those other things that taxing authorities or not taxing authorities, but the municipalities or the county may put on top of your tax bill. And those can be tricky, and those have risen quite a bit over the course of time.
Sure. So property tax estimator on the website, and you also said something about a more detailed analysis can be given if you reach out.
Yeah, if you reach out, we can take a closer look and issue a letter. Again, it's not going to be exact, but it may be a little bit closer than the tax estimator.
Very cool. Listen, I appreciate you coming on today. This was fun. This video is great too, by the way. So you guys in your office have done this video about what your office is and what you do. Why don't we play the whole video from the beginning? Because it's good. It's only a minute long.
Because we can't do anything about our property taxes. They're killing us.
Time out. Bring it in. Listen, it's important to understand what the property appraiser's office does and doesn't do. All the property appraiser's office does is to assess the value of your home based on the market. And in the Tampa Bay area, the market's been skyrocketing. We don't even call the plays when it comes to your taxes. That's the local lawmakers. We don't even collect taxes in our office.
What are we supposed to do?
First, file your homestead exemption. And if you're a veteran, first responder, senior, and many, many others may qualify for additional exemptions.
But my assessment was too damn high.
Well, did you ask for a review from us?
I fumbled that last year.
Every August, you're going to get a letter from us. If there are any issues, you can give us a call. Now I need for you to go to the website and study the property tax playbook. Bring it in. Let's go!
I think I'm in the wrong locker room, but great info.
Boom.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. Again, you can look at it however you want, but I think that one of the things that I said coming in, we were kind of antiquated in the way we thought about communicating when I first came in the office. People want to be communicated with however they best want to communicate these days. So there are people out there that never want to see another human being the rest of their life, but they'll go on our chat bot, right? Or go online. There's some people that still want to do it the old-fashioned way, that want to sit in front of somebody and have them type their application for them. So I thought, let's do something that's a little bit different. I mean, I can do a video in which I'm, looking into the camera and saying, the property appraiser's office does this, and people don't really pay attention. So we thought we'd do something kind of different, playing off of certainly my background, and get people's attention a little bit, and maybe explain a little bit more about what we do, or make them a little bit more interested in finding out what it is we do and how they can contact us. So we had some fun with it, and so far so good. It's had, for the most part, a good reaction. Some people are like,
No, it's great.
Yeah,
it's great.
yeah.
I mean, the point of it is great too. Like, look, don't complain. Get on here and get the information and reach out.
Yeah.
Hit them up, people.
There you go. Please do.
All right. Thanks again for coming on.
It's my pleasure. This was great. I've been looking forward to it, and we've wanted to do this for a while, and look forward to doing it again in the future.
100%.
I appreciate what you're doing, because it means a lot to have folks like yourself that are, first of all, I hate to say it, but that you are the future of our community, and the fact that you're interested and that you want to give back and that you want to provide information and get involved, that's so important. I look back at, when I was your age, and that's, again, going back to the genesis of how I got into public service. It was about giving back. It wasn't the politics of it. It wasn't for my ego. It wasn't any of that. It was really because I care about the community, and you do the same. And so this is a great thing that you're doing.
Well, thank you. And I think that feeling has only grown inside me. I mean, I was born here, and you know, everyone loves the neighborhood they live in for the most part and cares about it to a certain extent. But as I've done business in this community, and you know, now I have a wife and 2 kids, and that feeling of creating a better community only grows stronger. So that's certainly true for me.
Well,
but
keep
thank
it
you
up.
for that. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Bye, Nick. Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Take care. Bye bye.